Hi everyone, I'm Julia Fedorova. Welcome to the Speed Art Master Competition Talk. I have an absolutely amazing guest today. Before we start our conversation, as always, I would like to ask you to support this channel, add your likes, comments, and we are welcome your questions. So please welcome the head judge of Cake International for 7 years, David Kloss. Maestro, the stage is yours.
Okay, good evening, everyone. And it's really lovely to meet you. It's
Maestro, the stage is yours.
okay. So I'm just gonna. Okay, good evening, everyone. And it's really is great to meet you. And this is a casual day. So we've got Cake International coming up in November, and you know what? It's an amazing show. An amazing show. And I'm going to go through some things because I know Julia's going to ask me some questions, and I've got some answers for those questions. But what is Cake International? Well, it's a family. And it's a family of people who are so like minded, who are so enthusiastic, who are so passionate about what they do. And coming to Cake International is all about that. It's about that passion. And it's about the learning. I always say to people, every day is a school day. So every day being a school day, there's always something we can learn no matter what age we are in life. And if you've got a passion for something, you should be what I call the sponge. You should be really looking at some of these artists, going to demonstrations, looking at the YouTube channel, seeing what's there, and really just grabbing it by the hands and pulling it in. And when you've pulled that in and you've digested it and you've looked at the technical abilities and the foundation, then use that to your advantage. Use that in your skills. One of the biggest things in cake decorating is the practice. We don't all become superstars overnight, and I'm certainly not one of those. So, what you've got to say to yourself is find your niche, find something that you really, really, really love doing, and then focus on that. And that will become evident as we go through. When I started off, I didn't start off as a sugar crafter, I started off as a chef. Way back, probably some of you weren't even born when I started off. It was right back in the sorry 70s. So again, I started off as a professional chef, and I started off in the Royal Air Force. And it was my Air Force training that really got me into competitions, and it wasn't sugarcraft competition; it was culinary competitions. And I remember watching some of the stuff which the culinary teams were doing, and the Air Force had a way of, in that particular time, they would go into the kitchens, and all of a sudden you would get this big cloth, and the big cloth would cover the window. You know, the little viewing windows that you, when you look into a kitchen to see what somebody's doing, and they would cover that up. And I always thought, well, why are you covering it up? Because if you're covering it up, I can't see in. And if I can't see in, I can't be inquisitive. I can't see what you're doing behind the door, so therefore I can't learn. So you need to open your mind and let people in, you know, particularly when it comes to competition. You know, competition is important, and it's important that, for example, it's not just your spouse you go to ask a question. I remember, for example, saying to my wife, well, I've just made this exhibit for a salon culinary competition. What do you think? Darling, it's absolutely wonderful. Really? Happy wife, happy life. So consequently, you've got to say to yourself, that's not really the answer I want to hear. I want to hear your honest opinion. Please be as honest as you possibly can. And if you can't do that, then you're not the right person to ask that question to. So get somebody else and tell them, tell them to be blunt. And what you tend to find is if you get somebody else who is like minded, they will see it from a different point of view. The other thing you've got to take into consideration is the time factor. And when I say the time factor, I'm talking about that planning. Because I remember when I was in the Air Force and we were getting ready for competitions, well, we would be spending weeks, and a lot of it was written down. And those were the days when we had loads and loads and loads of chefs wanting to go into competition. So what had to happen then was you had to actually present your wares in front of the warrant officer. and you might have had about 60 people all competing to get this 1 or 2 spots to get into that competition. And he would come along and he'd have a look at your exhibit and see what you're doing. Okay, forget about it, close, you're not ready yet. Maybe see you next year. And then speak to somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. So you were competing all the time and you were doing stages. But you know what? That was excellent constructive criticism. It was criticism that meant they were actually looking at your work. They were taking what you had achieved and they were talking about your work. Now, they don't necessarily have to benchmark it against somebody else. What they're doing is they're looking at the standard and saying, if I'm entering that into a competition, will that meet the standard? Because let's face it, when you put your exhibit down at a competition, as far as I'm concerned, you have got a gold medal. You have got a gold medal. You don't have to do anything else. And then you leave. It's out of your control. There's nothing more you can do. But what is important is that you got the judges coming along and they have got the criteria. But of course, before you've entered the competition, you've actually read that schedule. You've seen what is allowed and what is not allowed. You've also then thought about the vision. So I'm going back to say what I mentioned when I was in the Air Force, which we used to have to document things down. We had to look at the schedule and then write a list for the schedule. What must be in, what is not allowed in. So those 2 separate lists, and they followed us all the way through. And then from those lists, we made sure that we didn't do what the critical sin is. And the critical sin is normally the last day of the competition. Sorry, the last day before you go to the competition. And you're there. And you finished it. It looks lovely. And it's nearly there. And then self-doubt kicks in and says, well, maybe if you just add a little bit more here or a little bit more there, and then you've gone beyond. You've sort of detracted because it's not as good as what you'd planned because it wasn't planned. It was reactive rather than being proactive. So it's important that you think of that. So my career started off in the Air Force, as I said, and it was in the catering. And I did catering. I spent 27 years in the Air Force. And I'd gone through the ranks. I left as a senior NCO, and I'd done a lot of culinary work, and mainly on the savory stuff. And then I got married, and a friend of mine made my wedding cake. This was the first time round, not the second time round. And a friend of mine made my wedding cake. So I happened to watch him make my wedding cake, and he did royal icing at the time, and it was on the style of Joseph Lambert. So again, technical, very ornate, very detailed. But he was a passionate individual. You could, when you talk to somebody and you see that passion oozing out of them. So I used him as a sponge, and I was picking his brains. And then when I went and took the wedding cake to my wedding, well, something happened. And I went, oh, wow. It's not supposed to be a yellow cake. So what had happened was the marzipan, the yellow marzipan that he'd used underneath, had started to permeate through the royal icing. And there was this tinge of yellow coming through. So I had to think on my feet then. And, my wife and my in-laws and said, well, David, you're a chef. There's something you can do, isn't there? So I decided I went and made some royal icing, and I got some just off-white, bordering on pale lemon. And I added some bits and pieces to the cake just to bring it out. And I then asked my wife if she would sort of change her bouquet and just put a couple of yellow pale flowers in that just to bring the synergy together. And it worked. It was no means a masterpiece. It was a cake which was fit for the occasion, and that's what I'll say. And then later
amazing story, just amazing.
And then later on in life, then in the late 70s, my brother was getting married, and he said, David, will you make me a cake? I said, Okay, I've seen I can make cakes. It's not an issue. I can do a nice fruit cake and all the rest of it, or a Madeira cake, and so I did all that. And then I made a little pasteurized church and a couple of people in front of it. And it was those days, for example, when we had I don't know whether people remember them. And it used to be the rice paper flowers, but it isn't rice paper flowers as we know it. If we think of flying saucers, which was the rice paper with a sherbet in the middle, then they formed the leaves of the flower. So I wasn't able to make the flowers in those occasions, but I did use some rice paper. And another thing that was in during that period of time was asparagus fern. And we would use asparagus fern behind that to give that replication. So again, lack of knowledge, lack of food safety. So saying, for example, I'm using a fern here and I'm putting it onto a cake. So I'm putting on flour on a cake. And those things then cross my mind. And of course, we didn't have products like, for example, fondants. We didn't have Siricino. We didn't have Renshaws. We didn't have all the myriad of sugar paste that we have today. So I had to make some. So I got the recipe out of La Gastronomique, and I went through the recipe, and it said add gum tragathine. Well, it didn't tell me how much gum tragathine to add. And as you know, gum tragathine is a hardening agent. Well, I was able to knead it and it looked all right. And I was able to roll it out and I got it onto the cake and I got the cake decorated. And I did it possibly about 3 weeks before the wedding. So it was well, and I got it out and we presented it to my brother at the wedding and it looked magnificent. And we got the knife. Well, what a disaster. Because that's the time when the bride and groom started to put the knife in, that they couldn't get it through the icing because the icing was so hard. And I said to myself, oh, you know what? I'm going to have to do something about this. But in the end, we got it into the kitchen. I went into the kitchen and we got a little piece cut, and then we cut the wedding cake, and then we give it out to the individuals, and then we give the favors alongside that. Nowadays, what tends to happen is people may even use a dummy and they will give you a cutting cake. So it's all of those skills and techniques which were never available for me in my day have come to the fore. So I then said, I must go and do some courses. So I joined the local college and I started doing courses in sugar crafts. And I did flowers and I did pastelage and I did royal icing and I did the whole lot. And I did that for quite a period in time. And I was still competing for the Air Force at the time. And I then went to Hotel Olympia. Hotel Olympia, I was competing and I happened to see these wedding cakes. And you know what? It just blew my mind. I remembered what my friend John Smith had done for me, the corporal, for my first wedding. And I remember what I had done for my second wedding. And then I seen some of these cakes, which just, well, I was speechless. Absolutely speechless. I didn't know what to say. I thought, my goodness. But then I did notice something. And that was when I went up to a cake and I seen a bronze medal on it. So I'm not one for not coming forward. I'm not one for not saying what I need to say. So I'm looking at this cake and I spoke to a lady and she was the head judge at the time. And she was an amazing lady. And some people may have come across her, Sheila Lampkin. Well, Sheila Lampkin was she was an absolute mentor to me. And I remember saying to Sheila Mountain, Sheila, I'm just looking at those cakes and I've just done all my qualifications in sugarcraft and everything else. And I've also just done a steering committee for the Belfast branch of the British Sugarcraft Guild to get a guild up and running in Northern Ireland, just in Belfast. And I said, you know, there's a shop across the road where we've just set up and they're selling these products. And there are these products called gem products. And I remember seeing a gem lily. And I'm looking at this cake and I said to Sheila, that lily is not handmade. That's a commercial product. And all they've done is they dusted the leaves and they haven't done that very well. And yet it's got a bronze. And Sheila had known me from the savory section on the Salon Culinaire. And she said, well, David, if you think you can do better, come and join us. Well, my goodness, that took my breath away. Come and join us. Come and join the elite. You know, poacher term gamekeeper. Wow. But I said to myself, give me another year. There's things that I want to do first. I want to get the Belfast branch of the Sugarcraft Guild up and running, along with the rest of the steering committee, to see where we are. I want to delve into pooled sugar and icy malts, because again, that's another passion of mine. I do pastry, so I do the laminations and the doughs and all the rest of it. So I'm not too concerned there, but I want to immerse myself in the techniques. And I did. I achieved a lot when I was doing that qualification. So much so that I was an external verifier for City and Guilds in catering and hospitality. And they then seen what I was doing and said, would I become an external verifier in Sugarcraft? Well, that was a red rag to a bull. Of course I would. I would absolutely love that. And they were doing the 73900 and they were doing craft and design. And it was all about, I want to do a cake for, let's say, for BMW. So what am I going to use? Do I want to have a BMW logo? Do I want part of a BMW logo? What do I want? Do I want a hat? And that really give you the design element. And you were then thinking about the artistic license and bringing that artistic license to the fore. And that's really where my passion came from. And then starting to work for Sheila as a junior judge, again, I was able to learn from the other judges. And I would they used to say, for goodness sake, David, go away, will you? Leave me alone. Stop asking so many questions. But you know what? If you don't ask the questions, you're not going to know the answers. And I remember judging later for Sheila after a few years. And when I was judging for her, I was judging the wedding cake section. There was a lady who had put 3 wedding cakes in. And she got 3 gold medals. And they were absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And she said, oh, David, she says, I'm really disappointed. I said, what? I'm disappointed. I said, well, why are you disappointed? Well, I wanted to win the best in show. And that's the passion and the dedication that I want to see. I want to see that individual is not satisfied with what they've done and they feel they need to do more. But then you've got to remember, where did they start? Where did they pick up that competition schedule and then come in, work from home, produce their exhibit, go shaking to the table, get to the table and put it on the table, and then look right, and then look left, and then say, I'm not putting mine down, I'm going to take it away. I'm not good enough for here. I'm not good enough. But you've got to say to yourself, who are you competing against? Are you competing against everybody else? Or are you competing against a standard? And as I said earlier on in my statement, when you put an exhibit in, you have got 100% a gold medal. Now, my job and the rest of the judges' job is to see whether you keep that gold medal. And that's by reducing the marks where we see room for improvement, or what I like to call development opportunities. So Cake International is fabulous for that, because we have detailed feedbacks on the sheets. And we've gone one step forward, and there's not many competitions have done that, and they actually put the scores down of what the individuals have got. So they get the scores, whether they're out of 10, whether they're out of 20, and they get the scores so they can see where the improvement are. And then if they look at their feedback sheet, then they again have the ability to see where they need further development. Now, to be a judge, you have got to stand in that spot. You have got to stand at that table. You have got to stand with your hands shaking, with your exhibit going onto that tablecloth and making sure, for example, everything is as good as can possibly be. I've heard people saying, oh, I'm putting 20 exhibits in. Well, really great for you. But are the 20 exhibits getting 100% each and every individual time? Or are you what I call, you don't plan to fail, but you do fail to plan? Are you saying to yourself, well, do you know what? For example, I'm going to put 20 exhibits in and I've got my time plan, but then life gets in the way. And life turns around and says, you know what, David, I'm sorry, but, your mum's not well. You're going to have to home and see your mum. So that timing that I allowed for one of those exhibits is no longer there. And then things get behind. And then your day-to-day gets behind. Or, I mean, it could be like we hear in the UK at the present one time where we're basking in heat. And we say to yourself, hold on, when I started planning all of this, there was no mention of a heat wave coming along. There was no mention that the sugar is going to react different to my hands, that that's drying too fast, or if I'm going to use paints, they're drying far too fast. So again, we have to make sure we know the area of the competition, and we need to look at the environment that we've got. We've also got to say to ourselves, do I have sufficient space to plan it so that I can do stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, and that I have factored in my fudge factor, as I call it, a 2-week window where I need to say to myself, okay, I'm behind on this. I've got 2 weeks to get back to where I should be, because I've factored it in my planning stages. And then there's that time when you need to get the audience round, when you need to have individuals who are like-minded people who may be doing their own piece, and they're going to put that exhibit down, their exhibit. So they will want your advice and support. But you know what? Do not say it's wonderful. What you see is what you get. Be blunt. And if it's rubbish, tell them it's rubbish. They've got 2 weeks to get it fixed. Okay? But remember, it's not your exhibit, it's their exhibit. They take the ownership for that exhibit. So that's only part of the process, because the next thing is you've got to pack it up. And then you've got to get it from the place where you're actually getting it manifested to the event. Well, it's raining outside. Well, if I take sugar outside and I get some raindrops on it, what's going to happen? I need to protect it. I'm going to stick it in my car, but I'm going to have a suitcase in the car. Oh, well, I'm taking 4 people. Oh, wow. Okay, I'm now only taking 3 people in my cake. Okay, and I'm boxing my cake up so that it travels well. I'm making sure I've learned all the tips and processes to get it from A to B. I'm planning my time, and I'm adding an extra 4 hours onto my time before I leave, because I don't know what the road's going to be like. I don't know what the traffic's going to be like. I don't know what diversions are going to be like. Do you know what? I'm going to fly. Oh, wow. What a nightmare. Because I've got this cake and the guy wants me to stick it through an X-ray machine. What am I going to do? Well, I've got my label on there. I've got it fragile. It's marked all over. I've got a full list. I've taken photographs, and I've got my traveling portfolio. So here's my traveling portfolio with every stage of my cake and how it's boxed up and what I've done and signed off by somebody else so that they can see it. And then you hope that they then take a sympathy journey when they're putting it through that machine, and they give you space to do it. Okay, so that's the best you can do. The other way of doing it on a flight is, and I've seen this many times, is people will put small exhibits in which they're able to transport as hand luggage. Other people will put large exhibits in, but you know what they've done? They've only just gone and booked a seat beside them. So they've got 2 seats. They've got one for their exhibit and one for themselves, because that is how precious it means to them. That's the passion. They have spent time and time and time again to get this exhibit to the perfect stage that they feel that they are hoping to achieve an award. But they've done their best, and then they get it to that table. So that's a bit of a round way of saying what my role was. And then I moved on and sort of said the opportunity began for my judging career, and it's led me to ultimately new roles in life. I mentioned the British Sugarcraft Guild as a judge and then became a mentor. But I've also done Cake International, Salon Culinaires, and visited many other places because I find that I need the stimulation. As a head judge, you don't get always to judge every exhibit, so you don't get the same time that your judges would get, because you are looking and you are managing and you are organized. And you sometimes say to yourself, oh, wow, our judges normally get between 7 and 10 minutes to judge an exhibit and write it up. Well, do you know what? That goes in a heartbeat. It goes in an absolute heartbeat. And then you're then playing catch up. So again, that's one of the most important things, learning from each other, having that passion, having those discussions, getting the opportunity to speak to judges whenever you can, getting the hints and getting the tips. So let's move on then. Julia's second question to me was, every successful career has a turning point. What was yours? Well, I think that's probably his question. Well, one of the defining points was mine was simply moving on from the assessing of the standards and the technical aspects into shaping international competitions, into writing the schedules with a team and then going through that schedules. And every year you say to yourself, well, I've just completed this year's schedule for Cake International, and you will get questions that you never thought you were going to get. You think you're going to nail it, but you never do. But it opened my eyes to the opportunity to see how much talented artists there were around in the world, and just how powerful cake artistry can be as a form of creative expression. And to me, that was fabulous. Now, I love this next question that she sent me. And it made me sort of laugh. And it probably made me a little bit angry. And that question was, imagine you could spend an hour with the young David Close at the very beginning of your career, full of hope, excitement and dreams. What conversation would you have with him today? And the conversation would be, for example, David, you're a young lad. Don't run before you can walk. Listen to your betters. Listen to knowledge and experience. Use individuals as a sponge. Practice, practice, and practice. And then you will become a better person. You meet the people, the experience, and gain the willingness to improve when you take time and effort to reach your imagination with their help and support, because they have gone along similar journeys, maybe not the same as you, but similar. So they can tell you the pitfalls that they've had so that you don't fall into them on your journey. So I would spend that hour with that young David Close, that spotty individual at 16 and a half years of age, and say to him, what do you want in life? And if I looked at that young individual then and that young individual now, I'd say to myself, how did I ever get to where I'm going? How did I make it here as head judge at Cake International? And it was with grit and determination. It was listening to individuals, listening to your audience, and more importantly, having the empathy that when I was standing there as a youngster putting something ready for the table, that I listened to people around me. I took on board what I thought would be beneficial to me. I made notes. I then reflected on those notes. I looked at feedback statements. I reflected on the feedback statement. I would occasionally pick up a phone and talk to somebody. Now, it's important that you ask the right questions, because they're not going to tell you how to win the competition, because they can't, but they can tell you what skills to use and how to improve your skills, how to improve your techniques, what equipment might be beneficial to you to improve that. So I would tell that young patient, stay curious, never stop learning. Some of the opportunities that ultimately define your career are the ones that you never see coming. I never seen myself as a Sugarcraft judge, but those two cakes, my first one and the one for my brother, have put me on the track to where I am today. And I thank those individuals for giving me that kickstart, because I love the passion. I love the enthusiasm.
So they were your turn point.
Sorry?
They were your turn point to this career.
Oh, yes. You've got to really listen and keep those turning points. And then, because the next turning point might be around the corner. That might be one turning point in your career, but there are more. That might be one chapter in your journey. So I started off as a sugar crafter. I then went into judging. I then went to judging to a senior judge. I then went from senior judge to a head judge. And then internationally. So you say to yourself, oh, I didn't see that coming either. So you take every opportunity that you can, provided you are getting the benefit. And the benefit for me, as being a head judge, is not about the glory. It's not about that. I'm quite a humble person. Mine is about giving back for the next generation. It's about passing that information on so that I can see the next generation. You know, I remember, for example, at Cake International, looking at some of the juniors, and I've seen some of those juniors today competing and winning gold medals. And you know what? You know, I see families and they've all competed, and I say to them, my goodness, I remember you when you were a whippersnapper down here. And look at you now and look at what you're producing. And I admire that dedication and that passion. And that's what I want to see growing and supporting the next generation, because the next generation of judges are on the way. But we have to make sure that we mentor them the right way and we give them the skills to do that task. So remember, new techniques of innovation that raise the bar once again. And every day is a school day. So I've experienced Cake International from a perspective very people ever will. What still excites me every year when I go to a show? Well, I could say that in one word, and it would be everything. Because I absolutely love it. And why do I love it? Do you know what? It's like a family reunion. You know, I might not have seen them last year or the year before, but they're back now and I've seen them again. And it's as if we only spoke yesterday. Because that's the camaraderie of the sugarcraft industry. You know, we talk about things. And it's fabulous, because some of them will say the good things about me, and some of them will say, oh, David, you judged me once, and oh, my goodness, I'll never forget that. But I then say to them, you might not have forgot it, but you're here today. And look at what you've achieved today. So something I said was right. So again, I admire what you've done. I admire that you've stuck at it, because it's very easy to turn around and get a notch schedule or get a sort of a lower award, a merit or a bronze, when before you had a silver and a couple of golds. You feel as if you're in the downward slope. And I remember as a chef sort of saying to somebody when I was teaching them, son, you are only as good as your last meal. Nobody remembers the ones before. They only remember the last one. So if it's excellent, they'll remember it. But, you know, if you do something which is not as good next year, then you know what? That's the one they're going to remember. You'll have forgotten about that. That's history. And we don't want history. We want today. We want the future. And we need to be thinking about that. So that's what excites me. The fresh ideas, the new techniques, the innovation, the interpretation that raises the bar every year. Every year's a school day, and sometimes you come along. I remember, for example, quite a while ago, at one of the exhibitions, we had the, what was it called? Illusion cake. And somebody came in and they had, I think it was a spaceship, and the spaceship was hovering above the cake. And you sort of went, oh, wow. And I was able to put my hand underneath it, and it was still hovering above the cake. And cool, there's something else I've got to learn. I don't know how to do that. And of course, nowadays we're using light, we're using sound, and we're using turntables, and we're being innovative, and we're having these lights flashing on and off, and we're having the music, and we're having the sound. And some instances I've even seen, for example, smoke coming out of dragons and things. You say, well, God, that was never happening in my day. What are they going to think of next? Well, they've already done that. They've got cakes that you can use remote controls, that are cakes on a board, and you can use them as racing cars. That innovation, that passion, that's something different. And it's always going to be there, and it's always going to grab your enthusiasm. And you just sometimes you say to yourself, I need to go and speak to that person. I need to speak to them. I need to use my old sponge mind and really pull that in so that they become my mentors. I can take their ideas. And that's what I like about, you know, what excites me about the show beginning. And it's a long show, you know, with 3 days we're there for and everything else, but you can learn so much. I talk to so many people. I normally go hoarse and exhausted when I get home. But I love it, you know, so that's the most important thing for me. So the next question that's coming up would be, for example, maybe I'm not good enough.
Yeah, it is always we have people who think they're not good enough. So please tell them we welcome to everyone. Just come and compete.
I think you have to. You know, I said it earlier on that you get 100% as soon as you put your exhibit down. But you know what? If you don't put it down, who's going to tell you where you went wrong? Who's going to give you the hints and tips to improve? Nobody. Don't worry what's to your left and what's to your right. That's not your business. Your business is the exhibit in front of you. And when we talk to an individual, and they will occasionally turn around and look at an exhibit across the table, well, look at that, that got a gold. I'm sorry, I can only talk to you, and this is your exhibit. I can't talk about somebody else's exhibit. You have spent time, passion, heartache, tears of joy. You've put all that passion into it. Why do I want to tell you about somebody else's cake? I only want to know about yours. You really don't really want to know what I say about your cake. If you want to go and have a look at that and see if it differs from yours, that's your choice. But mine is about you. You, the individual, who have spent your time, paid your money and put it on the table and made sure that the judges give you some professional feedback. And that's what we're here for. Now, you do occasionally get, for example, individuals who would look at us, but if I'm talking to them, for example, they may have an entourage with them. So we tend to not do the face-to-face because, you know what? I was at a competition once where I was judging and I was talking to this bloke and this was his cake and he got a silver and he said it should have been a gold. And all of a sudden, 10 people beside him, that was a gold. That's a gold any day of the week. So I said to them, I just looked them in the eye and I said, you know what? I said, if I'd have known there was an extra 10 judges in this room today, I could have finished at 6 o'clock and be done. But you're not judges. You're friends, your colleagues, your individuals who are supporting the candidate, the competitor. And the other thing that's on your mind is emotion. You have come here. You have spent sleepless nights. You've driven all the way up. You haven't slept. You've driven all the way up. You've got somebody to drive you. You're not sleeping. You're holding your baby, your exhibit. You're getting there. It's raining. My goodness, you've got your coat on the exhibit. You're getting soaked, but your exhibit's looking well. You're getting in. There's a little bit of damage. You've got a space in Cake International where you can repair that damage, provided you bring all your kit. If you're going to make flowers for an exhibit, you don't make 1, 2, 3, 4. You do about a dozen, and they're all perfect. So if there are any damages, you pick the next one up. Competition life is about putting your very heart and soul into it, and more important, putting your best work out. And if you can't do that, then don't expect to get the accolade that goes with it. So make sure, for example, you do your best. If we have anybody who is, for example, so passionate and so distraught that they feel they should have won an award, we have a cooling off period. We have a cooling off period of 28 days. And that is to get rid of emotions because the judges are emotional. They've had a busy time. The competitors are hyper emotional. They've been hyper manifested. They've got their supporters there. And we know it's disappointing. But on reflection, when you look at your feedback statements, sometimes you then say, you know what? I'll tell you what. I had a lady once in tears and I spoke to her about 15 minutes. I'm not going to mention any names, but I was at another competition somewhere else. And I met her and she came up to me and she said, oh, do you remember me? I said, yes, I remember you. I said, I remember you from Cake International. That I think I spent about 15, 20 minutes with you. You were distraught. You were in tears. You're never coming back again and anything else. And she said, David, she said, that was the best thing you had ever done. You had the courage to turn around and tell me where I'd gone wrong. And I could see it. But I could only see it weeks after it. And I still look at that piece now and I say, that's the piece that is getting me to move forward. Because I've got the feedback statement for that exhibit and I've got that exhibit. It wasn't a big one. It was a cookie. So they were able to reflect on that cookie and where they moved on. And she wrote me a beautiful letter and she even published it on Facebook. And I thought to myself, you know what? That really, really humbles me. And to me, That's the biggest accolade ever. It's not getting awards. It's mentoring somebody, giving them some advice and support, and then seeing them achieve something in their life, which you have assisted, albeit in a very, very small way, to get them to where they are today. So, as a competitor, competition isn't about providing you with perfection. It's about challenging you, yourself, learning, improving, and growing as an artist. In my experience, some of the most talented artists are often those ones who underestimate their own abilities. And that is exceedingly true. If you never take the first step, then you're never truly going to know what you're capable of achieving. And more important, when you take that first step, you may have already made mistakes on the way. So you may have done things to your exhibit that you weren't happy with, and you've stopped and moved. You've already hit the learning curve. You've already started the process on to move further, so that you can then say, well, that didn't work for me, but this did. And then you can move on that way. So those benefits, as I said, the constructive feedback is so important. Whether
But
you win a
without
medal or
this
not.
piece, you cannot achieve it, right?
That's
So
right,
if
yes.
you didn't challenge yourself, set a goal, you cannot achieve it.
No, you can't, because you're not giving it to anybody who's got an expertise to question it. So what you're doing is you're saying to yourself, I'm not good enough. But you know what? You say you're not good enough. But then again, say to yourself, okay, what did you do in school? Did you start off in kindergarten knowing everything? Were you taught? Did somebody show you? Did you learn from your mistakes? Did you then, on the infant school, have to now say, okay, so now we're going to give you an exam. Oh, hold on. I'm now presenting myself for an examination. Well, don't I have to practice for that examination? If I'm doing English, don't I have to study English? Don't I have to learn and then look at the questions and then bring the questions out? And isn't the feedback on my results telling me where I've not hit the mark, where I haven't made the standard? Well, Sugarcraft's no different, because we need somebody to tell us where we are. And you've got to remember, it's not one person. It's not one person that's judging your exhibit. There's more than one, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. You know, we judge with 2 people, and then I adjudicate. So we've got 3 pairs of eyes looking at that. And then we use techniques that we're looking at, and then we will touch it. We may damage something, because we have to test that it is what it is. It is what you say it is. The other thing I would say to you, the best thing you can do if you're putting an exhibit in for the first time is to look at the schedule. Then from that schedule, select what you feel you are passionate about, because your passion will show through. And most important, when you're starting to formulate your idea of your exhibit for whatever class you've got, start to do some sketching. Now, you might not be the best artist in the world. It doesn't matter, but put your ideas down on paper and then see how they work. And then run them by some of your friends, and this is my idea. But what you must never do, never ever do, is show anything, and I mean anything, either parts thereof, on social media. Because if you do, you've already opened it to the world. And the judges scan all social media, and if they see something which has been in another competition or anything before, then it's an automatic disqualification. So you've got to say to yourself, keep it to yourself. It's your exhibit. Don't let the world judge it for you. Get it judged by the professionals. Then show it. Then do whatever you want with it. It's yours. Take the pride in it. And even if it isn't your best work, put it out there and see if you can get some hints and tips. Say, look, the judge mentioned this. Can somebody give me another method of doing it? And then build up that experience, build up that repertoire that you're able to use and move forward. My advice is, don't simply let self-doubt make the decision for you. Have the confidence of your own work. Take the opportunity to learn and allow yourself to grow. You'd be far better off than you think. Get rid of that black dog. Get off my shoulder. I can do this. I will do this. And I will listen to what they say. because I am putting my exhibit in for me and not for anybody else in this competition. It's for me and me alone. And I will take what I get from the judges. So, what encouragement would I give to a returning competitor to do different this year? Well,
Yeah, sometimes people feel very comfortable to returning to Cake International year by year. I know many my friends they do it, but tell them what you expecting from them.
okay, what I will say, and I've said this to a couple of individuals who've been winning gold medals at Cake International. And I remember seeing them, and what you get to do is you get to see their style. So you know their style and you know their exhibits, and you say to yourself, oh, wow, that has got to be X's exhibit because that's their style. So the problem with that is you're already going to lose marks. Why do you think you're going to lose marks then, Julia? Why would we lose marks? What area do you think we would lose marks on?
So if you are not progressing in your journey, you're losing because you are not improving yourself.
Yeah, because what tends to happen is you tend to stick to the same subject.
And you feel comfortable in not progressing.
Yeah, you're in your comfort zone. So you tend to stick to the same subject. And then all of a sudden, what you've done is you've lost the originality. Your piece is no longer original because I've seen it before. It might be a couple of different squares here or there, but you know what? I've seen the piece before. So you're losing marks for originality. You need to think outside the box. What else can you do? There's bound to be other things that you can do that you can bring your skills into. So think outside the box. Go to something which really, in my opinion, floats your boat. This is what I want to do. Do you know why? Because do you know what? I've just read the schedule and look at that. I can see what I'm doing already. I've got this in my mind. Where's the paper? Where's the paper? Give me the paper. And I've started making some little notes and I've got some sketches. And I said, yeah, that's it. That's it. And then I've got the criteria and I've looked at the schedule. And I've got my list of A, which is must have, and my list of B, which is not allowed. And I'm going, tick, tick, tick. Oh, I can't do that. Tick, tick, tick. Hey, I'm on a roll here. Now I need a plan. How long is it going to take me? Can I build in my fudge factor 2 or 3 weeks? Have I got my travel arrangements? Have I got the equipment? Have I got everything I need? What's the weather conditions going to be like over the next few weeks or that period in time where I'm going to be working on that in my workshop? Is my workshop going to be too hot? What do I need? Do I need dehumidifiers? Are there other means that I can use to dry it out? All of those types of things that you could think of. So again, don't be afraid to take the creative risks. We've got to take creative risks in life. Some of the most successful memorial competition pieces are where the artists dared to try something different rather than simply repeating what they already knew they could achieve. Competition should be about more than winning medals. It should be about pushing your boundaries, challenging yourself, developing your skills, striving to produce your very best. Each piece should represent a step forward in your journey, not a step back or not I'm on a level playing field here. You've got to go your journey. You've got to see it through. The entries that leave the lasting impressions are often those where a competitor has challenged themselves, showing genuine creativity and demonstrating the courage to turn an ambitious idea into reality. That's what I would encourage everyone returning to competition a second time, a third time, a fourth time. Really get out of your comfort zone and challenge yourself, because learning new skills helps cement the brain. It keeps it going. It keeps the excitement going. It keeps the spark going and the enthusiasm. Okay, so that leads us nicely on to her next question. Come on, I love these questions that you've put together. The next question you put together is, what qualities make a competitor's piece truly memorable long after the judging is over? Well, do you know what? I can already, sitting here today, I can think of one piece. I can think of many pieces, but there's always one piece that has stood in my mind. And, you know, if I mention it, I'm sure some of the people who may be listening to this who have been to Cake International shows, And it was a decorative exhibit. It was a miniature decorative exhibit. And it was in the style of a cobbler. And what the cobbler was doing, he had a little red heart in his hand. And the red heart had been broken, cracked in half. And he was there with a very, very fine needle. And he was mending it. And the piece was called Mending Broken Hearts. And you know what? To this day, the passion, the imagination, how somebody could think of that, and bring that ambitious idea to reality, it baffles me. Some of the pieces that I see at Cake International, the stuff that they're doing nowadays, making hair strands out of different mediums, and each of them individual, and cutting those individual strands and then making them into hair. We used to do it in the days gone by when we used to use things like, for example, spaghetti, and we used to use vermicelli and all the rest of it. Well, those have gone now because we're looking at sugar now. We're looking at the sugar stuff that we'd use in confectionery. We don't use confectionery. We don't use spaghetti in confectionery. We don't use tagliatelle. We don't use those type of things. So again, it's making it from the mediums that we use in the confectionery world. So a truly memorable piece is one that combines the outstanding skill, the technical ability, the strong emotional connection. That, excuse me, that storytelling. I need to tell a story. Now, your story is your story, and you will know your story inside out. Excuse me. But what I won't know is what your story is. Because your exhibit, the piece that you've put in, that you've sat in front of the table for me to judge, it has to talk to me. It has to say, David, look at me. Look at my skills. Look at my ability. Look at my techniques. Look at the way I've crafted. Look at the sounds I'm making. Look at the story I've told in the whole exhibit. And then I want you to go away, David, and I want you to reflect on it. And I want you to come back and have another look because I'm sure you've missed something. And that's the important thing. That's what drives you in when you look at an exhibit and you go back and you see something different every time that you've got there. That's what makes it long lasting. So people effectively continue talking about them years afterwards. When creativity skills, storytelling come together seamlessly, a competition piece becomes more than an exhibit. It becomes unforgettable. And I have got about 3 or 4 in my mind that I can just, I can just dust off now. And there they are, and I can see them. I can imagine myself being back in front of them at the exhibition and judging them. I can actually turn the table around and I can see all the things that I've never seen before. And that gives me another spark. It excites me to see what's going to come round that corner. So the next question was...
These competitors just push us see more. We see more. And just have people to compete and learn from competitors and judges and improve their skills and back again to compete.
Oh, definitely. And you know what? There are times, for example, when you go along as a judge and you won't have a Scooby-Doo of how they've done it. I don't even remember the name, lady Linda Wong. Well, Linda Wong was a Chinese artist. And I remember going back many, many years ago, and she did the extension work. And the extension work would come off the cake like this, and it would just sit on its own. There'd be nothing underneath it, and it would sit on its own. And I then said to myself, I wonder how she's done that. So I contacted her, and she said she had made some little frames. So she got the little frames, and then she had all the little frames underneath the cake board, lifted it up. And as the stem came out and hit the frame, that's where it stopped. And these little frames were all the way around. Then she got a warm paintbrush, and then she disintegrated away from the frame and took the frame away. But she made sure that the icing she was using for the extension work was super hard. It was really quality stuff. And then she layered it and layered it and layered it. And I was fascinated. So I bought her book. And that's then sort of took me on another journey where I needed to go in and have a look at this. And you spend a bit of time going through those processes. So there are many. The ones that remain to me are usually those that have achieved difficulty while making it look effortless. It looked sublime. And it had me thinking, how was it done? She got a gold medal. I would have given her 2. It was that good, you know. But you have to follow these things through. You have to find out who the individual is, and then say, would you mind, for example, giving our judges a little bit of a talk on the process? You know, because we're not in it every day. We go to a competition maybe once, twice a year. So we need to keep what I call CPD, continuous professional development, up, so that we're learning, we're looking, we're scrolling, we're seeing what's happening and how is it going. And that's the most important thing to me. So I have many, many, many great memories of many exhibits. So looking at where we are today, how do you see the future of the cake competitions in our industry? Well, the standard of work continues globally. And what is incredibly exciting, I believe, we'll continue to see greater innovation. People's mind, and mainly the younger ones, because there's a lot of people, what I call myself, a bit of a dinosaur. You know, we've gone through our ice age, and we're now in our twilight years. And whilst we've still got the passion, we haven't got the flexibility or the dexterity in our hands to make them. But what we have got is we've got the ability to teach people how to do it themselves. And that ability to pass on communication by means of teaching skills or talks or mentoring and guiding people through. So I think, you know, we believe that the greater innovation, more international participation, and even stronger, well, interrogation of artist skills, technology and education. The future is very bright. I think the future is amazing. You know, I'm looking at the new products that's coming out online and how people are changing those products to make them bespoke to themselves. I remember, for example, when the molds come out, and one of the first molds I ever had was the pearl mold. Do you remember it was a long strip, and it looked like little balls. And the first time I remember using it, and you used it, opened it up, and then you put it around the side of a cake. Then you say to yourself, well, hold on a minute. That doesn't look like a pearl. That looks like a string with a load of blobs. So I then got my tweezers out, and I started to put my tweezer in between every one of those little pearls, and they started to look like pearls. And then I made them all the way around. So the mold was only a foundation. It was a means to quicken a process, but it only assisted me when I learned how to use it, when I made it mine. You know, it's a bit like doing the baby cribs that you used to get. For example, you push a baby mold in for a christening. But you know what? You had to make it bespoke. You had to give it some character, you know, give it some looks, give it some personality, change its shape, make it mold. As an individual, it's ideal. We have a class in Cake International where we do the beginners, and we let them use the molds because we want to support our industry. If they're making molds and models and everything else, we need to see that they're able to use them. So what better way to letting them using in the beginners area? So I think that's a fascinating way. If I could give every competitor just one piece of advice before they begin creating a competition piece, what would it be? Well, it's a really easy question. I can answer it quite straightforwardly. Read the schedule. When you've done that, read the schedule.
Again.
When you've done that, read the schedule. And when you've got those people coming round that are going to do the viewing, give them the schedule. Ask them to read the schedule and then give you advice. So take the time to read the schedule. Choose something that's genuine, excites and inspires you. When you're passionate about your concept, the enthusiasm will shine through. I hopefully think that you're passionate about my role as a judge, because I certainly am. And I hope that shines through, because it's important to me that I give you the right information. The final piece makes the entire creative process and the juices flow more. And it's so rewarding and enjoyable. Embrace it. That would be my advice for the competitor. Question: what is something that photographs or videos cannot capture about international cake competitions? Well, to be quite honest, it's another easy one. I don't know whether you have judged, for example, online. And if you're judging online, you're getting a 2D surface. You're getting a print or you're getting a video, but the person making the video is showing you the best parts of the video because it's their exhibit. Well, when you've got a large amount of exhibits, I think we had 1,900. So you've got to say to yourself, the sheer scale of the show and its unique sense of community as impossible full capture in photo, and they couldn't capture that in photographs, in videos. Seeing the competition pieces up close, having the ability to turn them. I have a couple of little gimmicks that I tend to use. I don't know what I've got here. No, I haven't got it there. I have a little torch that I use, and I bring a little torch with me. And if somebody's doing, let's say, for example, Royal Iceland, and they put a collar on, well, I will get my little torch out and I will go underneath the collar to see if I can see any air holes. So it's those techniques that you need to be looking at. I'll also be looking, if you're doing double piping, that it's on a straight line. If you've got, for example, you've used a pencil and you've marked it, or you've used a scribe, I want to see whether that scribe line's still there. So it's about all of that you've got. And I can only do that if I've got a physical exhibit in my hands. You'll see us when we go to Cake International, we pick them up, we look at them, we turn them, we twist them. We look at the bottom, we look at the top, because the whole exhibit is judged 360 degrees. It is 360 degrees. And it might be something that the first judge hasn't picked up, that the second judge has picked up. So when we have that collaboration, and we discuss the exhibit, oh, didn't you see that? Oh, no, I didn't actually. Well, funny enough, and then the discussion takes place. So you might lose marks, or it might be that it's something they missed, which was perfect, and you need to bring that up. So again, that's what I would say. The experience, you can't beat an experience of a live competition as opposed to photographs or even, for example, video, because whoever's doing the video is showing you what they want to see.
And think about small details when you do your masterpiece.
Yeah, you're right. Always about the attention to detail. The attention to detail must be 100% correct. So, we're coming towards the end of my presentation. I didn't realize. How long have we been going?
Almost an hour.
Oh, it's an hour. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So let's just pick up a little bit more then. As head judge, what advice would you give somebody entering Cake International for the very first time? I would say, sit yourself down, look in the mirror, and say to yourself, I can do this. I have the ability. I know I've got the skills. I'm selling cakes now. I know I've got the skills. Now, they may be commercial, so they may not be your best work. So you need to be looking at your best work. And then people say to me, for example, so what benefit am I going to get out of entering a cake competition? Well, you know what? You've got the ability to say award-winning cake decorator, which you couldn't say if you hadn't put anything in because you'd never done it. So that might increase your commerciality. It might increase your business. But most important, you will learn so much skill, so much knowledge. You will take away far more than you're ever bringing. That's the important thing. You will take away far more than you're ever bringing. Most importantly, read the schedule, understand the critique, choose your category carefully, and project it thoroughly. Have that story. Say to yourself, when that audience is in looking at your exhibit, ask them what the story is. Don't tell them. Ask them to look at your exhibit and say, okay, here's my exhibit. What is the story behind my exhibit? Because if it's not talking to them, it isn't going to talk to the judges. So that's important. Mostly remember that entering into an international competition is an achievement in itself. Just getting to that table and putting your exhibit down, that's an achievement. That's bold. But remember, keep the blinkers on. Bring your exhibit, put your exhibit down. Don't look left, don't look right, walk away. You have done what you have done. It is in the lap of the judges now, but they will be constructive. They will be kind. They will be sympathetic. They've all stood where you're standing today. They've been there. They've had their ups and downs. I've had merits. I've had not just schedules. I remember when I was doing a catering competition once, and I was taking a chicken chaud-froid to a competition, and I was on the bus, and I was holding this on the bus. And by the time I got to the competition, well, do you know what? The whole base had all cracked, and I was in tears, absolutely tears. It taught me a lesson. Don't do everything at your workshop. Get to the event and say, what can I finish off here? What is going to have the potential to be damaged in transit, and what can I do here at the competition to make sure there's minimal damage, and that I have my extras, my extra flowers, my extra models, whatever it is, I've got everything I need to make sure that it will be there. Focus on producing your very best work rather than comparing yourself to others. You're not competing against them, you're competing against the standard. Most important, and I really mean this, enjoy it. Because believe you me, you will get a buzz, a real buzz. And it might not be about your exhibit. It will be about others. It will be about the industry. It will be about those that have achieved. I hear all the time. I hear the tears. And sometimes I'll have a look over when people are getting their awards and they come along, and there'll be tears of joy, and then I've got the other tears of sadness. Embrace them all. They are emotions. And without our emotions, we are not artists. We are just coming along a conveyor belt and pushing something out. We need to have that passion in us. We need to understand the passion. We need to have the ups and the downs to learn from our experiences. It will give you your full potential if you do that. Last question. Wow. Looking ahead, what are you most excited about creating creatively and professionally? And if you're happy to share personally as well. Well, professionally, it's pretty easy. I'm excited to continue supporting international competitions. I love to encourage people. I love people to want to listen, to want to take on advice and support, and to achieve. I want to see those people achieve for themselves. That little tiny bit of information I've given them, or a judge has given them, I want to see that grow and grow and grow and grow. I want them to be the very, very best that they can be. I want them to maintain the standards of the industry. I don't want the industry standards to go down. I want to make sure that we maintain those standards. I want also to make sure that we maintain the integrity of the standards. Okay? Because we need to have some benchmark, and we cannot erode that benchmark. We've got to make sure that we maintain that. And I think at Cake International, we do that considerably well. I think we're open and we're honest, and we're always willing to listen. We always listen to the competitors, because the competitors, well, they're not going to enter something if, for example, they don't like the schedule. So who better to ask what you'd like on the schedule rather than the competitors? What do you want to see? And we get the list, and we're always a listening organization. So we will put out, we have a competitions group where people can ask questions, and in there they ask questions about the competition. And I get to see those questions. I don't get to see who they are. I get redacted information only on technical advice for the competition. So I get Class B, for example, wedding cake. Can I use internal structures? I look at the schedule. Yes, you can. Could you give me help with my design? Sorry, design is not part of my remit. My remit is specifically on the context of the competition and the rules and the regulation. It's your exhibit. It's your imagination. It's your personality. But think outside the box. Think of something that excites you, and then make that into reality. So personally, what do I expect? Well, I enjoy the opportunity to involve with a community that is constantly evolving and continues to inspire me. And when it stops inspiring me, that's my time up to take off this hat and put it to one side. but I'm not there yet. I still have the creativity. I don't have the abilities now, but I do have the creativity and I have the passion. And believe you me, when I'm talking to somebody else who's got that passion, be prepared to sit for 4 or 5 hours. That's David Close. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you, David. I hope we just started our conversation and we will have more about Cake International, about yourself, and I'm happy to kindle people to go to Cake International, compete, learn, make friends. It's amazing opportunity to challenge yourself, and we still have time to make beautiful cakes and bring your knowledge home and do it again. So keep in touch, create cakes, share your love to our community, share your knowledge, and just keep the show going.
Happy crafting.
Happy crafting. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for watching us. Keep in touch. With love, Julia. Bye.
Bye for now.